Hello, and welcome to our presentation, Tweens, Teens, and Public Media, The Missing Middle. This title begs several questions. Why are they missing? Where do they go? How do we find them and bring them back? We'll try to answer these questions today in the context of our new initiative, By, With, For Youth, inspiring next-gen public media audiences. It's my privilege to introduce my esteemed colleagues joining me here today. First up, we have Milton Chen, Senior Fellow and Executive Director Emeritus at the George Lucas Educational Foundation, and importantly, also an alumnus of both Sesame Workshop and KQED, the Bay Area's public media station, and a person on whose expertise we often rely. Second, I have Mary Madden, a Senior Fellow with us here at the Joan Ganz Cooney Center at Sesame Workshop, an expert on privacy and technology, trends in social media use, and the impact of digital media on teens and parents. She's leading our research on youth media practices along with our colleague Monica Bulger. And finally, we have Deb Sanchez, Senior Vice President of Education and Children's Content at the Corporation for Public Broadasting. They are our partner in this work and steward of the federal government's investment in our public media system, which drives diverse programming, particularly addressing the needs of underserved audiences. And that's what brings us all here together today. So before we jump in, I'd like to establish some context about the Cooney Center and this initiative we're talking about today. So first, our center is named for Joan Ganz Cooney, the visionary founder of Sesame Street, who in her documentary work in the 1960s observed how many hours children were spending in front of what Minnow famously described as television's vast wasteland. And as we all know, Joan saw television as an opportunity rather than a threat, and public television as the vehicle through which to reach young children at scale in order to address learning gaps that were created long before kids even arrived at school. She founded our center in 2007 to continue to advocate and innovate for children in the rapidly expanding universe of digital media, where we work with producers, policymakers, and practitioners to guide them toward what's best for kids, inspire and instigate thoughtful design and development, and build a community around our shared purpose. And that's what brings us here to the present day and our focus on tweens and teens, really the broad expanse of kids ages 8 to 18, a key segment of our country's 68 million members of Gen Z. These years are marked by key transitions, including how youth engage with media. They are shaping their unique identities, with media taking on a stronger cultural role in shaping how relationships work and where representation matters. They experience a shift in influence from family to school and an expanding range of content and platforms. Their interests are characterized by breadth, and the constant growth of media, creators, and platforms means they're more likely to find what they're looking for. We know from the Pew Center's research that Gen Z kids, more than previous generations, are more diverse, more educated, and more motivated to tackle the world's big challenges right now. And also, very critically, they are true digital natives. Most have never known a world without smartphones. So what does this mean for public media and our missing middle? It's for this young audience that we developed Next Gen Public Media with our CPB colleagues and a terrific team of researchers and partners. We know the media habits of tweens and teens and the platforms they use evolve rapidly, which pose both opportunities and challenges for serving kids in this landscape. Our By With For project, the title refers to how stations typically think about media production and young people, not only creating content for kids, as audiences tend to expect, but also working alongside youth and supporting creative and participatory activities. And drawing on the service mission of public media, how media can be purposeful and designed to benefit youth in a non-commercial way. Fortunately, there are plenty of examples of how stations are already engaging youth very well, and there's no shortage of new ideas in this community. One comment: most critically, public media's missing audience of tweens and teens is not only their future audience, but those kids are also the future of our society. In many ways, their ability to shape the future depends on their ability to harness media, and it's from that place that we begin our conversation. So first, I'd like to ask Deb Sanchez a question. Deb, you and your team are charged with focusing the educational work of stations all over the country. Why are tweens and teens a priority for public media right now?
So I'll just, first of all, thank everyone. I'm so pleased to be here for this discussion. And listening to Michael's opening comments, I don't know how one would listen to that and not be inspired and want to work with young people, as they are such a significant, important constituency in our country. And that, with that same passion and energy came a lot of our work. But I'm going to go back just in time a bit, kind of pre-pandemic, if we could even imagine that. We were looking at a media space that was really, as we all know, disrupted by technology in good and bad ways. And for me, as someone that looks at the education space in particular, the education space, this is again pre-pandemic, was also being disrupted in so many ways, in both good and bad ways. And then we were also looking at these young people as the disruptors themselves, and how they were looking at new platforms, new sources of content to learn and share with what they were learning, what they were seeing, what they were observing. We knew YouTube's a popular destination. We knew gaming was popular. We knew podcast listening was growing. We knew a lot of statistics about those platforms and where they were. And at the same time, as we were looking at this media space, we were looking at how young people were learning, we were funding a number of independent projects within public media, where we were also looking at the design and creation of media involving young people more directly. Specifically, we funded PBS NewsHour student reporting labs as they worked with young people to find and share stories that were important to them, and looking through a journalism lens. And we also worked with our partners in San Francisco at the station, public television and radio station KQED, as they embarked on a youth takeover of their station to involve young people more directly in the design of their programming for a period of time. So to us, we know that the involvement of young people creates a more diverse, more rich perspective. And we were hoping that this process would attract with us a new generation of people within our public media family. So we looked at all of this and said we needed to really study it and have a better sense for this space, not only knowing where they go, but what their preferences were, how they interacted, and really study it with the eye of public media and the attention of public media, much like we've done with our youngest audience, where we've paid close attention to the experience and what they learn and how they share. We wanted to put that same attention to our next generation, our 8 to 18-year-olds. So it's where we are today, and I'm really excited to share with you what we've been learning. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Deb. And I think it was very much that motivation that brought us together, and really led to the research work that Mary's going to talk about right now. So Mary, I know you and Monica, our colleague, are deep into writing your report on your conversations with youth, and we'd love if you could share just some of your favorite highlights and insights.
Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be part of this discussion and share some brief highlights from this work. And I'll just say, for anyone who's interested in learning more about this project, I just wanted to note that the full report will be coming out later this month and available on the Cooney Center website. So what I love about this work is just how thoughtfully it was designed to really integrate the voices of youth. And so starting with really a broad literature review, and then a centerpiece of conducting focus groups across the country, we are rooting this work and what we are recommending to public media in the voices of young people. And so we were incredibly grateful to spend time with 50 youth participants. We interviewed these kids who are ages 10 to 17, and we included voices from diverse groups of youth, not typically represented in media research. We partnered with a range of youth-focused organizations, and we talked to kids from all over the country, from 9 different sites, including rural, urban, and suburban areas. And what did we talk about? We talk to kids about how they spend their time, what they find interesting, how they find new shows, apps, videos, what issues are important to them, what misconceptions adults have about youth. And of course, we also talk to kids about their experiences with public media. We ask them for their advice about what public media should do if they want to engage with people their age. And then we also talked about how their lives have changed during the pandemic. You can't conduct a project like this or any research really right now without acknowledging the significant impact that the pandemic has had, not only on kids' learning, but their social lives. And of course, even just on our research itself, we conducted these interviews like this over Zoom. And so that actually enabled some unexpected advantages in the number and range of voices that we were able to integrate into this research. And so what we found is largely that the current media landscape that you described to us is one of abundance and seemingly endless personalization possibilities, right? So teens described spending their free time moving across platforms and devices depending on their moods, their interests, and their access to certain kinds of connectivity. And importantly, the different platforms that they choose really end up being sort of a gateway into different social connections. And so those choices and those affordances are critically important. And that connectivity was quite varied. We found some kids we spoke to in rural areas did not have reliable broadband. In some cases, we had to have our conversations over the phone when connections weren't reliable. Other kids spoke to us from their phones, from their mobile devices. But most called in from what appeared to be their workspaces used for school, their kitchen tables, their desks, and their bedrooms. And so we got this window into their lives, really a view of the resilience during this time and the role that media played in both helping them continue their learning, but also supporting interest-driven learning. And so that was one of the constants that we found in this work is this dominance of video content across all the platforms that youth use. Yes, gaming is hugely popular as well, but it is supported and augmented by all kinds of video content. Yes, social media is incredibly popular, but the lifeblood of a lot of social media right now is video. And so even for kids who told us, no, I don't really create videos of my own, then we would later find out, oh no, they're posting videos to TikTok regularly, and this is a part of the way they express themselves and communicate with their friends. We were really surprised also about this area of how-to videos, which is something that was identified in our first report in our literature review. We think it's an especially interesting area for public media to explore because kids are increasingly seeking out this short form, sometimes ephemeral video content to help answer questions that they have, to support interests that they want to explore, or simply just to solve a problem. And this is an area where, of course, it can be difficult to assess the quality of the information that you're encountering. And public media has a real opportunity, I think, to provide more trusted content so that when kids are searching out this information, they can trust the public media brand to provide quality answers to the stuff they're looking for. But by and large, right now, public media is not part of the regular media diet for most kids in this age group. And in fact, even the term public media doesn't resonate with many youth. They tend to think that it refers to public social media content, right? This is like a term that has not much resonance with kids unless you start talking about experiences with shows and stations, particularly when kids are younger. And then kids start to remember, oh yeah, I loved watching Sesame Street. I loved, using the PBS Kids app, right? And they remember it quite fondly, but they don't necessarily make a connection with content that is available and accessible to them now. So when we asked them for their advice on how we could make public media more appealing to kids, what kind of, apps or shows could be created, we hear from kids that this issue of representation is especially important. And what does that mean? Well, it means they want to see kids like them. They want to see diversity reflected in the programming. They want to be involved in the creation. In order for this content to be truly authentic, we need to really integrate both the input from the youth themselves and also take advantage of the fact that these kids love to create and share their unique perspectives. I mentioned earlier, we asked about some stereotypes that adults have about kids, that question is always particularly interesting. And one thing we heard is about the assumptions that adults tend to make about teens being all the same. Teens told us, not all of us like gaming. Not all of us want to be constantly connected. And in fact, during this pandemic, there's been an interesting and unique time to observe the fact that young people do have more freedom to consume media. In fact, sometimes that's the only thing, staying connected to the internet is the only thing that keeps them connected to friends. And they're finding that after a period of time, they're getting bored. We heard this repeatedly. And so surprising to us, and counters the stereotype about kids being addicted to their devices. And so ultimately, I think one of the takeaways for us is that, this method where we are talking to kids, asking for their opinions, informing what is possible and what might help to fill some of these gaps in commercial media is, I think, really a model moving forward for public media to consider. Kids are grateful for a chance to be heard, and they were surprised that we were taking their opinions seriously. It shouldn't be surprising to them. And a space where public media can differentiate from YouTube and other platforms is adults taking seriously what kids have to say.
All right, thank you so much, Mary. It was great to hear your take on all of the things you're learning. And actually a perfect segue to Milton. Milton, given your experiences at Edutopia and in public media and Sesame, I expect you've seen both the evolution of all kinds of media and kids' use of it. What in this landscape excites you about today's potential for engaging kids?
It's such an important and innovative conversation and project. I worked at KQED, our PBS and NPR station here in the Bay Area 25 years ago. And even back then, we had some thoughts. We'd have meetings, strategic planning meetings. How can we address those that we're not serving as well? How can we become more inclusive? And you can fast forward 25 years, and here we are now, where you have a whole range of media tools that youth can now use to tell their own stories. So the idea of by and with, and not just for media, not just for young people, is so critical. And now we've reached a point in the evolution of media where we can now make this possible. I think it's very exciting. We've also learned that this is the right audience, as Mary was reporting on. They feel very much underserved. They feel like their opinions are not being taken into account. They feel like this is a world of education run by adults, and they have an important voice. I do believe that this could be a new model for education as we come out of COVID. We're looking for new models, more innovative models, better ways of engaging students and educators. And what we're talking about here in terms of youth media and public media for teens and tweens could be one of the solutions to what lies ahead. I also think that the community is looking for solutions. Racial equity has become at the forefront of our national agenda, and this is also a way of achieving some of our racial equity goals. I know a number of communities and foundations and supporters are looking at what could we do differently than what we've done in the past, and this is a great opportunity to engage young people across the nation in the telling of their own stories. So yeah, I'm very excited about this.
Fantastic, thanks, Milton. And it's impossible really to have a conversation outside of the context of living in a pandemic and the converging crises of public health and racial justice and economics and so forth. So in that context, we have what kids are saying to us and the many channels they have for sharing their ideas with the world. Mary, you spoke to all these kids. I'm going to do a quick lightning round here at the end. If everybody could just maybe take a minute or so to answer a question. Mary, I have one for you. What could, based on what you heard from kids, how do we design something that really meets what they're asking for?
Yeah, well, I think part of what is so special at this moment is that kids have been thrust into this online learning environment. And that has meant they have had to figure out how to be on camera, right? How to share their ideas across different channels if they weren't already. And also to learn, some of what we're referring to as Zoom literacy, right? And They're learning etiquette, turn taking, all kinds of skills that apply to being able to tell your story and share it with the world. They're understanding a bit more about privacy, what's in your frame and out of your frame, right? And they're seeing more of their peers sharing their stories, right? So I think there's an opportunity and a foundation there. And I think we really have to ask them. We have to start by asking, and I think we'll be surprised when we see, especially if we do it at the local level with trusted organizations and partners, schools like Student Reporting Labs is such a wonderful example. And I think there are ways that we can grow on that foundation and really just imagine a public media system in which when we ask kids about public media, we see that they value it, they know it, and they see themselves as lifelong participants, viewers, supporters. I think that would be a future that we would all like to see.
Thank you. Thank you. Milton, I wanted to go back to your comments about working at KQED and public media's opportunity here. There's been so much amazing work done at public media stations across the country that we've learned about this year. I was curious to know your thoughts on what public media stations specifically could do that's differentiated from what's already out there. What are some of the unique opportunities that they could take advantage of?
Well, certainly there's a youth media movement, many projects around the country. That's exciting, but I think one thing that public media brings to this is this national reach. There are public media stations and centers around the country that would help achieve some goals of equity and providing everyone, hopefully. That's always been public media's mission, is to reach everyone. I think that's one thing. And then also a key point is the mentoring. PBS NewsHour, Student Reporting Labs has been mentioned. The chance to be mentored by some of the very best professionals in this field who are doing journalism, who are writing scripts, who are producing and editing. That mentorship becomes very important. That's something that public media stations have a lot to offer.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Deb, it's your turn. As the person who's really brought us to the table here to work on this project together, I'm curious about how public media is meeting the moment. We've seen how in the pandemic, stations around the country have really risen to the challenge to engage with their local communities and fill in the gaps and try to be really helpful. And I'm so inspired by the local impact that stations have. At the same time, you have the national reach of big networks like PBS and NPR and other organizations. And on top of that, the internet makes everything available anywhere all the time. So you wonder how to leverage the best of those sort of three levels at which folks operate. And what are you thinking about as we move into this sort of new phase of public media?
I think your reference about what just happened in the pandemic is really significant. And it's important to point out that we're unique in that we are both local and national. It's not a networked organization. It's a networked together, but it's not a top-down type organization. So during the pandemic, we saw local stations responding to very specific educational needs of their local communities. And through those partnerships on the ground, those partnerships then were transferred across states and through our PBS network. So there's this real collaborative spirit within our public media community and a desire to serve all, but serve all based on what's best for my local community. So the partnership that public media offers to young people in communities to sit with young people, to, as Milton discussed, provide mentorship, provide help in design and curation and creation of media beyond just placement of it in a social media platform, but just thinking about it and being more networked in that way, I think is something that we certainly bring to the table at this unique time that we're in.
Thank you so much. Terrific. Okay, just to close quickly, thank you so much to our guests, Deb, Mary, and Milton, and for everybody who attended our session here today. I encourage everybody to visit the link on our last slide for more information about the initiative that we're working on, blogs and research reports, and future updates as this project grows. Thanks, everybody.